Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. It's very nice to be here. I am Rita Hausken, and I want to welcome you all to this live. Wow, we never thought about it that way. So, what I want to invite you all into is that if you are joining us live, let us know where you're listening in from. So, I can share that I'm calling in from Stavanger, Norway. And Sylvia, what about you? Where are you
I
dialing
am
in?
calling in from Luxembourg.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I want to make sure that we're all engaging in the chat. Tell us where you're at. If you have any questions, please let us know. But also just know that LinkedIn sometimes has a delay. When you're putting in your questions or comments, we don't necessarily see it immediately. So that is why we're not picking it up immediately. And for you who is watching the replay, we want to hear from you as well. Want to answer any questions that you might have as well. Now, wow, we never thought about it that way. Now, this monthly live isn't just about providing more information, because there is already, I would say, information overload in this world. This is really about to provoke thinking. It is to lean into insights as if you're hearing things for the first time. Think of it as these aha moments that you have, these subtle shifts in energy that you might experience from something that you hear that create a change in how you see or how you experience something. Um, it's kind of this new way of looking at challenges and questions that we have and actually turn them around as maybe they're opportunities. And this series, it was born from a very personal story. It's the story about my son Benjamin, who was diagnosed with Hurley syndrome and was given a very short life expectation of only 7 years. But what I want to share is that against all the experts' predictions, he lived until he was 27, right? 27. Talk about Mission Impossible. But his life taught me to view every single challenge as an opportunity. And the most powerful and impactful method to manage that was to ask different type of questions. So it would be asking who instead of how. It would be switching things even into something that feels so dramatic as why is it happening for me versus saying why is this happening to me. So these questions, they help me to look at things from a very different perspective. Now, from this period, my own favorite question that I lead any thought-provoking conversation with, and I'm bringing it up here as well, is what is this problem designed to solve? Or what is this problem designed to create? So we're turning everything on its head, looking at it from a positive perspective. Now, every month, I will be joined by someone who looks at things from a very different perspective. They approach things from a different perspective than the majority. And the intention for us to really do this is to provoke that thinking, to discover, to help each and one of us discover that there are so many easier ways to solve problems or challenges. There are easier ways of doing things than necessarily the traditional norm of thinking. So today, I am super happy to say that I am being joined by Dr. Sylvia Rohde-Liebenau, which is a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, and she is a lifelong explorer of power. Yes, power, the word power. Now, I want to say this that words don't really have meaning until we give them a meaning. So some of you might think of it as power as in energy and production of energy, but what we're talking about here is from the human capacity, the human space. So I am curious about you who are watching. What do you feel and think when you hear the word power? So if you want, write that in the chat as well. Now, what I know about Sylvia is that in her unique executive coaching practice, she focuses on using power constructively to solve problems, to foster personal growth and drive positive change. So I am so happy to have you here, Sylvia. And I am very curious, why this interest in power?
First of all, Rita, so good to have this time with you here. And yes, why this interest? I think it is because I was always curious about human relations, and I was always inquisitive, like asking, like, even my parents, why do we have to do it this way? Can we do it another way? And then I was very lucky when I was around 14, 15. I studied ancient Greek in school, and we had this fantastic teacher who was very thought-provoking, and we studied Plato's philosophies. And there's a lot of thinking about power in politics, in human relations, and social relations. And I got really interested in that. Like, how does it really work then? Which led me then to study political science and law to understand it better. Also, at that time, I was in the peace movement. I was like, yes, let's find a better way to create peace and security. But I knew that I didn't understand it all. So I wanted to study it to not only like have an opinion, but really understand how politics work, and how international politics work, how security politics work. So I started to study guns and bullets at uni, really focusing on international relations, security studies. But then already in my master's, I had passed a few months at the UN doing an internship, and was able to do my research on the UN disarmament conference at that time. And that led me to focus on the psychological aspects of those negotiations, which gave me a very interesting view on power. So that was not at all on guns and bullets. It was very much on values and the political worthiness and political reasons, rather than only like power, force reasons that were discussed there. So fascinating. Yeah. And that kind of got me to go further into that. So for my PhD, I said, well, I'm going to do security studies, but I'm going to not at all do a guns and bullets topic. So I got a scholarship to study the civil society organizations in East and West after the Helsinki Final Act, who had a very strong influence on intergovernmental relationships, and thereby also on the power balance of power in the international system, and also in the domestic powers in East and West, in particular, of course, in the Eastern countries.
Yeah.
And had a huge impact on the peaceful end of the Cold War. So that was my fascination with power that in those times. And then I got to work in international institutions, later on consulting, then later at the European Investment Bank, where I worked for 17 years. And I got to not study, because when you work, you don't study, but you're in the middle of it. So you learn a lot about power relationships, the way that some people mistake power with force or control. They think that if they sit on top, then they have power, but actually, do they really create the outcomes they want to create by doing so? So I really took on a lot of learnings about how power is seen, how it's not seen, how it's misunderstood, and how it has worked, and how it can also be used in a very positive and constructive way. And that really brought me to, like, when I left in corporate, to really say, like, how can I help leaders understand power in a more helpful way in today's world that is highly complex and fast moving, where the old recipes on powers don't work anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It's so interesting. When I was listening to you right now, I was thinking about, we talk about, let's say, powerful questions. And I was thinking about, what about forceful questions, or questions that we use when we are using force? And like these two distinctions as well. I'm thinking, powerful questions is sometimes with deep listening. It's when we're engaging with people because we're deeply curious. But this force question I'm thinking about is almost like torture or investigation. And so the concept of power is kind of these two concepts, right?
Yeah. On that, what immediately comes to my mind, questions that are forceful, questions that are powerful.
Yeah.
Questions that are forceful, they generate fear. Questions that are powerful generate freedom. Like free thinking, I have more space to think. If you ask me a powerful question as a coach or as a leader, I will feel, oh, I can think about more than, so I'm more free to generate ideas and action afterwards. If you use force in your questions or in your communication, I will shrink. I will be more fearful. And I can give you an example. I had a senior manager who I supported in my corporate time. He had the difficulty that he had a very old school style of working and thinking. So he had problems with his team because he was too forceful. He bullied people along, and the organization didn't quite know what to do with him, how to, like, because he was highly talented, but not using his talent to the best. And he told me once, Sylvia, I know what I'm doing. I sometimes really, I need to intimidate people so that they are more on their toes and they will work better. And I said, are you so sure? Because if you do that, people are more fearful. They will not listen to you really, but their attention will go to how do we protect ourselves from this avalanche of threatening behaviors. And they will withdraw also because it's very unpleasant. So you will not get the most energy and willful action from them. And he actually said, oh yeah, I got to think about that. He didn't do it afterwards because it probably was too ingrained. But he saw the difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting, some people think that the only way I can get through to people is by intimidating or using question, which is very guiding, but in one way can diminish another person, making them look weaker. And I think this is very often where, we are, at least personally, I feel when people are on that kind of power, they talk to people in a very specific way, or they're using a specific form of force. So it doesn't matter if they're rulers of countries or rulers inside an organization. I want to ask one question in the chat here. Do you have access to the chat? Because somehow I'm not seeing the chat on my screen.
I do not see it.
You do not see it?
No.
Okay, so for the listener who, if you haven't seen us responding, I want to double check something, because sometimes technology isn't in our best favor. So let me just go in. I want to make sure that we are indeed running as according to plan. Let me see. Yes, I can see that we are live. I'm going to go in there, check on my phone, and see. Oh my goodness, we have a lot of comments. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if we haven't responded to you according to what we promised. I'm using my phone right now, and this is how it is in this
to improvise
technology. We improvise, free flow. So let's see here. We have comments coming up. Hello, Jamil. Different types of power, and the main one for me is authentic power. Jamil Sarabia. Thank you so much. And then we have Samar Rassam. Power is the ability to learn and adapt. It's about, let me see, it's about overcoming obstacles and continuously striving to become the best version of yourself. So do you want to speak to that? What, power is the ability to learn and adapt. It's about overcoming obstacles and continuously striving to become the best version of yourself. What do you think about that?
Yes, because it's power to. It's not power over something. So I completely subscribe to that. And so it's this, in this way, it's like power to overcome something or to go somewhere. Like my definition is always like power is the capability to create intended positive outcomes. And then there's also therefore, of course, to overcome obstacles. And it's also, for me, it's about resourcefulness.
Yeah.
So for me, there's, in order to create these outcomes, I have to have understanding of the situation, of the system, of relationships, a certain degree of wisdom, and I have to be resourceful.
Yeah.
And resourceful could be in myself, so that I like the authentic personal power, which is also part of my smart power concept. Yeah. And it is because that brings the power from within. And then resourcefulness is also like, do I have resources around me and in my relationships? So being resourceful means, for instance, I have great relationships to others and they will be able to advise me, to support me, to have similar objectives, or we are aligned and working in a similar situation, in a similar direction. And that is also, these are resources. So resources are not only I have money, I have people or instruments, it's also the relationships we have and our inner capacities.
Yeah. Now that's powerful. We're using the word powerful. I love using the word powerful. Like very often I say to my clients, you can also see it on my LinkedIn page, that I am not here to empower you, but I am here to remind you of how powerful you are. So the term powerful is a word that, and power in itself is a word that I have learned to really enjoy. I think there is so much to it. But again, you have been living as an explorer of power since you were a young child, guns and bullets, and then moving into UN, peace, from an organizational perspective. Where do you see that the power that you are referring to has given you in your exploration of power the proof that the version of your power works? There are so many versions. So what's the proofs?
I think it was an exploration that taught me some lessons. So one early lesson was when I was in my first job, I had this this responsibility to manage it was the telecom sector in development cooperation. It was at the European Commission. And as a political scientist and lawyer, I didn't know anything about telecoms. I did know a lot about Russia, which was the beneficiary country, but I didn't know anything about telecoms. So what did I do? I knew that there was DG Telecoms, Director General for Telecommunications, and they were interested actually in collaborating with us, with our program. And so I said, that's fantastic, because these guys know about the technicalities, and I only know about the country and I have the budgets, but I'm not sure like how we create the programs in the best way. And so I reached out and we started to collaborate, and it was wonderful, until my boss said, Sylvia, be careful. They will invade us. They will take control. And I said, sir, this is going pretty well. I understand what you're saying, but actually, this is a great collaboration that helps us to have more credibility and more authority with the counterparts, the beneficiaries, the other donors, the consultants also, because consultants could actually like manipulate us a lot if we didn't know anything about it. And so I convinced him to trust me. So I couldn't convince my boss to trust me, or she did, thankfully. And then we really created a great collaboration. For me, it was much more easeful. So I didn't have to work like crazy to create something that wasn't capable actually of creating. Of course, they gained also, which we were happy in the end that they did, because why should they not gain access to like other counterparts, know about like telecommunications thinking at the time from other countries. I mean, it was good because these were colleagues at the European Commission. And our programs worked much better than they would have done otherwise. And I know that because the colleague before me had avoided that collaboration. So it was opening up to collaboration, kind of daring to give up control, or to actually to share control, daring to share control, and therefore like gain more power, gain more capability to create outcomes that were really very positive for us. And for the beneficiaries we were serving.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, the first thing that comes to mind when you were sharing that story now is, you know, very often we see power as, I have the power to keep something as secret. Like information is power, or whatever I say. I'm not so sure if that's said anymore because we have information overload. But keeping things as a secret, inner circle, you know, we have a lot of the inner circles in organizations. We are inside, so we are the only one that can get to know these things. What would you say about that when it comes to moving the world forward, looking at leadership, looking at organizations of before having this, it's only the C-suite that knows certain things, and now we see things released on YouTube or social media. What do you think?
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Knowledge.
And therefore, the more we share it, the more power we have. So the more knowledge we share, the more power we will have. My experience is that, first of all, I think that has changed. In old days, definitely knowledge is power, and therefore we have to keep it to ourselves. But then believe, because pieces of power needed to be connected more and more. So you can't build a castle with your own little piece of power. You need all the other pieces. So if I cling to mine, I won't share with others, so the others will not share with me, and then we all stick with our piece of knowledge, but we don't create anything. So as a matter of creating trustful relationships and collaboration, we need to kind of give each other presence of knowledge. I share this with you, and then you will also share with me. Of course, if a collaboration lacks any trust, that is very difficult. So you have to first build the trust. However, sometimes sharing knowledge actually is part of building that trust. And the outcome is definitely more powerful interactions and capabilities. And I've seen that anywhere in organizations.
Where do you see the biggest difficulties to adapting this understanding lay?
I think it's really, like, from my experience in the corporate world, it's when we don't trust the other party, so to speak, when we think that they're out there to obtain a dominant position, and then what we give them, they will abuse it for their benefit and leaving us behind. My experience is that the more I have shared information, that of course that was for me to share, and not things that in the corporate world you absolutely should not share, but things that are actually belong to the corporate space. They are not secrets. If you share that, you create trust and you create collaboration, and you will get information also from others. I'm thinking of when I was leading a project, create a new leadership model in the organization. There was another part of the organization working on larger organizational change. They wanted to know more about where we were going with our project, and we wanted to know more where they were going so we could help each other. And the woman who was leading that program worked in a very similar way as I did. seeing like, okay, this is really connected, and the more we help each other, the better it will be for the organization, and the more powerful each of us will be, and we together. So we shared a lot. And
Yeah.
sometimes that was not so well considered by some of the hierarchy, people in the hierarchy, because they felt, oh, but this is a project of our domain, so if we give away information, then we might lose power. So that wasn't always shared. We managed to do it, but I could see that this approach wasn't like widely shared.
Yeah, it's interesting that, you know, when you talk about that, I see when I work with clients where some of the difficulties inside organizations is the silo effect,
Exactly.
where it's like, we know more and we don't want to share what we know, because it's like, then we will not have the budget. So one way is to keep that. They think they keep the power, and what we've started to discover is that it's through communications, through opening, through kind of cross-cultural conversation inside the organization that is needed in order to create a more powerful organization, and an organization with more impact.
Exactly.
In your,
and if I may, what I have seen also with the very successful senior leaders, they're the ones who actually share. I mean, I remember a friend of mine who was a senior leader in an organization. She was laughing to me once. Yeah, can you imagine that these people who try to like silently, secretly pass on these messages, in the end everyone will find out. But do they really think that they can get away with it? And do they really think that they will become more powerful? No, really not. And so this leader was someone who was always sharing and was always open. And look, she was someone who got to the very top of the organization. And as I've seen others who were also like, they would come to you to say, actually, I have something I want to to talk to you about, because it could be interesting for you.
Yeah.
Building trust, building like consensus around them. Yeah. And that's actually how it works.
Yeah. So if you were to give any advices from your model, what could you take us through your model of power?
Yeah, sure. With pleasure. So I call it smart power. And the reason why I called it smart power, because it's the opposite of old power that I do not consider so smart in today's world. That is old power that is mostly based on force and control, because we don't obtain so much as more power over than power to. And so when I was like working on it, also working on my book, which is already touching on the subject, what I found is that it's really about these 5 elements. And then I found also that it coincides with SMART, smart. So the first actually is about being able to think in systems, systemic power. So when you're able to see the system, you see more than only the parts. So you are able to see, okay, if we, for instance, collaborate, if we put these things together, or these pieces of knowledge, then we get more. Also, when we think in the long term, we will be successful more in the long term. You work on sustainability. So you have to think in systems to be powerful. The second is, I call it merging power, which is the amplification of your power by being able to pool your little power. So you get more power by pooling your little power, your little control, your little knowledge with others. It's like proven. When you do that, you augment. Merging augments the power. Then you have authentic personal power, which the participant before also came to. It's about really the inner mastery, the integrity, the alignment with our values, the ability to manage our emotions, to speak in the right way to people, to manage our energy. That's the authentic personal power. Then it's relational power, which is our ability to be in a relationship with others, to create constructive relationships, to think of and about others, to include them. So it's also about inclusiveness. And then finally, it's I call it transformative power. And why do I call it transformative power? Because it's about being able to create transformation because we are not like stuck in the middle of transaction, but we are like working on purpose. We are working intentionally, and when we do that, we can actually create transformation. If we are not intentional, we can never reach that.
Yeah.
So it's a systemic, merging, authentic, personal, relational, and transformative power.
Yeah. And of these categories, which one do you experience there might be the most resistance to, or which is more about like, well, that is not so important?
That's a great question. Most resistance. I think it's the merging power that is very counterintuitive for many people in the corporate world. You spoke of silos before. I think it's still, even though everyone says let's get rid of the silos, silos are bad. I think it has become better because it's in people's consciousness. When I tell these people things to my dad, who is 92, he always says, "Oh, Sylvia, it's so fantastic! All these things that you're doing, we couldn't even dream of that in my days." Also speaking about like being authentic, all these things, like it's absolutely not possible. But still, this courage to say, I'm going to share some of my control with someone else.
Yeah.
Also because if I think I'm actually the best person doing this, or our department is the best because we are the most competent, or our perspective is the most important. And it's really difficult because if we go, like I'm risk management, I give away power to legal. Do they do this as well as we do? And then will our point of view, which is so important, not be considered so anymore? So I think it's not only like insightfulness, it's also honest commitment to one's own profession and point of view. So it's not necessarily people do not want to be collaborative. They just believe like we have to control this, and therefore it's courageous. It is courageous to say, okay, let's pool power so that let's pool control so that we can have more of it together. So that's difficult. And then I think it's also the authentic personal power. It has some obstacles still because many people in the corporate world and in the world in general feel like we have so much to do. We are so busy. Just leave us alone with this, like authenticity things and personal development. Actually, I don't have time for that. I sometimes meet people who would like to do coaching, for instance, but then they feel like actually that's taking time away from the important things I should be doing, and I don't have problems, like personal problems, so why should I invest in that, in those efforts? Is it a luxury or something like that?
Yeah.
And I think it's this thinking: is it a luxury to work on our authentic personal power that may help, like hold people back doing it, whereas it's not a luxury. It's investing in mastery, in my view.
It's so it's so important, and I think on this topic of power, and as you say, it's about, are we willing to give this power or share this power? And it's like, it's like a child giving away the candy. It's like, how do we get the child to do that? How do we invite this child to become a caring, sharing soul that wants to do this, right? And then I'm thinking that because it's so ingrained in us to keep tight on power, it needs more work. It needs our time. It needs organizations to say, this is a priority, and we know it's actually it is a personal development area to learn about collaboration, co-creation. The power is so new going forward compared to what it was. But what I'm curious about, do you see the world in itself being able to adapt to this version of power? Like, because it's small organizations, big organizations are mirroring the world. Like, what do you think? Do you think it would be possible to shift share power and be co-creators and collaborative? And what do you
Well,
think?
first of all, I am a possibilist.
Yes,
So I never think anything is impossible. So of course it is possible.
yes,
What I see also is that there currently in the world there are many, but there are two main streams. One is really a stream of going into exactly that direction, seeing we have so many challenges in the world, be it on the global level or also on the local level,
yeah,
that are highly complex, that require collaboration, that require systems thinking, that require empathy. And that is a stream where people are very willing to go in this direction, and they're doing it. And then you have another stream, and I believe it's a stream that is also looking at complexity and volatility and is afraid of all that.
yeah,
And therefore is drawing down barriers to say, okay, since this is so threatening, so let's keep out the migrants, let's pretend that climate change doesn't happen, because if we close the eyes, then it doesn't exist. And this stream tends to use or go back to old power, because then of course you have to control, you have to negate that something is happening, you have to keep out opinions.
yeah,
And so we have both. And for me, the question is, how can we empower leaders who and citizens who are willing to engage with the reality of complexity that we have, and to empower them so we can actually get to this stage where we work on this level of thinking in systems, collaborating, sharing control, and all that.
yeah. And that is really, I think, something that, think about the title, wow, I never thought about that way. When you were talking, I'm thinking, yeah, when we lean into, let's say, climate change problems, if we are looking to solve these issues, it's exactly the version of power that you're talking about that is needed. It is
Exactly.
collaboration, it's to communicate, it's to co-create, it is to look at things from so many angles. It is to step away from silos and go in and
Exactly.
really be curious in one way about the challenge that we have, because what I said, what is this problem designed to solve? So we might have this problem, but it might be that it's designed so we can learn to properly communicate with each other or to collaborate, because then we're going to solve
Yes.
some problems. But I always question this, that if we think that we're solving the bigger problems like climate change, and as leaders, we're so scared of giving power away, how do we think that the world is going to move when individuals are not ready to move? And that's why the work you do, and also I do, is so important. So if anyone is interested in really learning more about what you are doing, because you're the expert in this field, you've written a book, you are about to launch another book, where can people find you? And how do they connect with you?
The easiest way really is via LinkedIn, because I'm currently creating my new website, where you can also will be able to find me, which is called Smart Power, the website. But the easiest way, the stable way, is via LinkedIn.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. And again, I'm not sure. I mean, I know we're running live here because I can see it, but because I can't see any dialogue and questions coming in, it's a bit annoying, because I love for us to have conversation with our audience, right? But let me ask you, what is one takeaway if we're thinking about, wow, I never thought about it that way? What do you think people might sit with after listening to this conversation that is, that's new. I didn't think about it that way.
Following our conversation, I would say, whether it's new or not, but it's very important, is to really link it to the real social and political and business challenges that we have. To see, okay, old power wasn't a bad thing in itself. It worked when it worked. But in order to thrive as societies and businesses in the future, and as humanity in the future, we have to see power in a different way.
Yeah.
We can't be any more like, if I sit on top and I control, then I have the power, and that's a great thing already. No, because that way we actually do not achieve what we want to achieve. And exactly these big goals of climate change or smaller goals, like how do we organize our cities today? It's very complex. We can't, like, there's someone on top and they do it alone. It doesn't work, because we need the knowledge, the contribution of many different parties. And all these really require us to rethink. So I think it's this consciousness in the world we live today. If we want to thrive as humanity, as societies, as businesses, we have to rethink power.
Yeah. And I definitely stick with that after, listening to you, being the expert on the word and the concept of power. That, again, power is a very powerful word. It is to be used. It's not to be scared of. It is to lean into. It is the definition that needs to be rewritten. Like the old power, which is the forceful power, that is the one that we see so many places and we have experienced through many organizations. That is one version of power. But there is another version of power, which is the opposite, which is collaborative, open, vulnerable, authentic.
Yes.
And I think when it comes to that, we also see that there is a need for leaders going into the future of being open about their purpose, sharing about challenging, taking risk, in collaboration with their team and working really hard. So
exactly.
Thank you for the conversation. And for those of you who have been listening in for almost 45 minutes and without being seen properly by us, because we haven't seen you, I would love for you to keep sharing your comments. So when we go back to LinkedIn, we can actually have a look at them.
And we can respond to you then.
Right? We will respond. For sure, we will respond. Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Rita.
And I will invite everyone listening, connect with Sylvia, amazing in her field, an amazing coach, executive coach. Also, what is your role in ADAPTAA, by the way?
My role in ADAPTAA is, as we call it, the Chief Simplicity Officer.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful week, and we'll meet up again in a month's time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being there.